Very good. So this is the schedule of how we're going to proceed with our work and the timelines. So please note that the small groups are today and tomorrow and on Thursday. In each of the small group sessions, you're welcome to join all three of them should you want to do so. Part of the task of this evening will be to prepare for the meeting that we have on the 23rd. So ideas that we'll be generating tonight, we will present to the full group on the 23rd. So we will be seeking volunteers to help lead what those points may be. It could be some of the topics that we talked about in December. It could be new topics. And so that would really be the point of the meeting. And so we have the full group meeting on the 23rd. And then we also have the March State Council. So for us to determine, if we need additional policy work that requires that working with State Council committees and further feedback to harmonize any policy disagreements. There's interim focus area group meetings as needed. We're having a full pipeline meeting on the 24th of April to report of the CTA Board of Directors in May. Are there any questions about the timeline? Okay, we can go on to, So the goal of the group is to, focus area is to identify 1 to 5 and to make a plan that we're going to actually use we have a template in which to use for the presentation. So ideas that are generated this afternoon, this evening, we will work on how best to present that work to the meeting later on this month. So that's the goal of this meeting. We'll go on to the next one. So here we're going to check in. We're going to talk about briefly what happened at State Council so you can understand in context how many pieces of this subject on teacher pipeline, teacher preparation, teacher retention and recruitment specifically, what happened at State Council. So we know what happens concurrently, what work a State Council has done. To help just inform some of the conversations we might have about having to go back to State Council, soliciting further input from the policy committees. And then we're going to talk about ideas and refine those, and that's how we're going to adjourn the meeting. Any questions? And if I'm missing you, are there any hands raised, or we're so small, just do a shout out and so I can call on you. All right, we'll go on to the next one. So this is the allocation of votes. So if you recall, we talked about a series of items that were part of previous legislative history. We spent a lot of time doing that in December. And then we had the ranking of all the different small groups. And this is just to remind us where we were back then in December, right? Reduced class size was the #1 issue, minimum teacher salary, year-to-year salary match, paid student teaching, prep time for elementary educators, and teacher loan forgiveness, etc. So those were our top vote getters. This is just to remind us to put in context what we may continue on with these thoughts or generate different ideas. If you'll go on to the next one. This is just, an update of what happened at State Council to kind of put in context. And I bring these issues up because they all are part of the work that we're doing, but I don't want this to, stop any of the conversation. So these items, NBI 52210, 102213, as well as 102231, were all part of the negotiations report. So as State Council committees receive NBIs, they discuss it in their various committees, and then they have their set of recommendations in which they will recommend to the floor of State Council. And in these particular instances, the negotiations committee voted to disapprove these NBIs. And then State Council actually adopted that position on the Sunday of State Council. So I want to just speak to these briefly. Again, I said I didn't attend State Council. I was out on medical leave, but I have talked to staff about what went on in committee, how the committee thought of these various proposals. And if there's anybody who has any new news or saying something different than what I'm telling you, please let me know or speak up. So if you look at MBI 52210, this was, it says minimum exempt professional salary level for the county they work in, automatic increases each year, right? And so Adam, if you can pull up that particular NBI, because I really want to put it in context. So this was an NBI from last May. And really what this NBI is speaking to is minimum wage and exemptions from minimum wage. And this class of employees is typically, I will say, where we're trying to deal with the situation is our part-time faculty community college. And we filed a lawsuit in this particular situation. Educators, for the most, in K-12, this is not applicable to them. So that was the discussion, is we're not going to approve or don't recommend approving this NBI because we're already dealing with it in other ways. And so the actual negotiations report, Adam, do you recall putting that one up? If not, I can read from it. You have that? Thank you so much. And so, where is it? I think it's the last one. Yes, thank you so much. It gives the rationale. So at least, and they took it from a different standpoint, that if you had to mandate the minimum salary schedule, this was their rationale for disapproving it. Could trigger layoffs, ability to bargain salary schedules, comprehensive health benefits, class sizes, etc. So negotiations took it from a purely standpoint of negotiations. If you had such a mandate on not only community colleges, but K-12, what could the impacts be? And so I just raised this. So like, if we're going down, us as a group, as our recommendations go, we'll have to have a conversation with negotiations to talk about what a minimum salary would be if in fact we want to explore that. So I just wanted to provide that in context. Are there questions about this one? Okay. So going to the next one. Oh, sorry. There we go. NBI 102213. This was also recommended by the negotiations committee to disapprove. And this dealt with a very particular recommendation, which had to deal with volunteerism, right? So NBI 102213, Adam, can I talk to you about going back to the negotiations report for what that is? Thank you so much. On the first page. Thank you. Their rationale was they really didn't want a one-size-fits-all solution. Managing a school looks different around the state. Volunteerism, they want to be able to bargain this issue, and they didn't want a mandate put on it, particularly around volunteerism. And again, I mentioned this not to, stop any conversation, but like, as we're thinking through these ideas, thinking about the policy committees that we're going to have to talk with and refine some solutions that we may have, or change our policy, right? Like, all of those are within our capabilities of what we can do as an organization. So let's go to that last one. And you could just, thank you so much, Adam. 102231. This was particularly interesting. This one had to deal with year-to-year salary service, and also negotiations. So when we talked about ranking, one of the top 6 things year-to-year requirement that a school district honor that when you go to another school district, the negotiations committee recommend not doing that. And so that was also voted on state council. And can you go back to the rationale that the negotiations committee offered? Thank you. They thought it could be used as a tool not to hire veteran educators, and actually used against against veteran educators. And I don't want to quote Mark DeWerk because he was on our meeting in December, but I think he also cautioned that as well and just brought that up as an issue. So negotiations committee thought that as well. And the last one is not an MBI. It's a budget principle. And this is really, really important. So if you went to state council, and this is something that happens every January as part of what we do, both for K-12 and community colleges, is we set budget principles. The FPE committee is primarily responsible for it, consulting with the Community Colleges Association and adopting those budget principles. The committee discusses them. They actually present them on the floor of council. And so they did this again. And this particular budget principle was expanded upon to deal with what could happen in this year's budget, could happen in regards to legislation, but dealing with the recruitment and retention and educator shortages and absences, and really to deal with the financial barriers to become an educator. And so I thought this was happening in real time, responding to what our members want. I understand, and if folks heard what happened or discussions that went on about this, was in regards to loan forgiveness, right, as a tool, with the Biden administration dealing with that, but also from the state side, the state being able to write off or not be taxed on, let's say you got the $20,000 loan forgiveness, that the state is not going to tax you upon that. So that was one of the discussion points around this particular budget principle. So this has been adopted by state council. We'll look at it as we're going through the governor's trailer bill, what discussions will happen between now and the May revision of the budget and the final negotiations of the budget. So I just, I'll stop here and ask, if you have any questions about these MBIs or have any information that I've missed about, what happened at state council.
So all of the, this is Angela, by the way. Hi. So the ones that had to do with the money, the two that were, I think it was 2 or 3, they weren't, the rationale was basically that it'll mess up negotiations, but it wasn't that it was not a good idea for retention. Is that right?
Right. I mean, so when we're looking at retention, issues, I mean, we have to look at it from all those pieces. And if our negotiations folks are saying this is a consequence, basically that's what they're pointing out. It's our recommendation as the negotiations committee that we not do year for year, right? We may think it's a great idea. We may, again, go back to the negotiations committee, have further conversations or refine our policy. I'm not saying, all of our options are still open. I just wanted to provide context. So if this is a strategy that we really want to pursue, what avenues might we have to go to make that happen as a policy matter?
Well, like those particular ones, which there were a lot of support for, because those are the ones we wanted to prioritize, was then the chase isn't in that. Like, I'm just thinking it's really about increasing the funding source, and which is a much heavier lift. Like,
yeah,
would change the entire funding stream for public education. That's really what we're asking for.
Yes. And we're in a situation where we know the budget is what it is, right? And the year-to-year salary match is, it's, I don't want to get into debate. That's for you all to do it, but it's a market force, right? So like, are you going to, do we think it's a good idea to make school districts compete with one another?
Yeah.
Yes or no, right? Our negotiations people think maybe not, but other of our committees may say it's great. CPD may say this is really worth us, going into this policy area. But that's for you all to talk about. And that's why I raised these issues, because if we're talking about our work that's going to go on in February and go on for March, these are conversations we're going to have. Thank you, Angela. Others? You all are being so quiet. I'm looking at Paula and Esther. What? So we can get into the conversation too about what kinds of ideas maybe we'll go on to the next slide, Adam, really how we're going to generate ideas. Or we love the ones that we already have. Or you've got new ideas since we talked last December. Really, what ideas have emerged since last meeting for you on this topic?
With going back just a bit, this is Paula. The years of service, we're seeing in the Bay Area more districts doing that. Our district used to be one of the few that would do that, and now we're hearing more and more because they're having such a hard time attracting teachers, and especially our ones that the districts that don't pay quite as high. If they can offer full years of service instead of just taking 7 to 10, they're more likely to draw some of those veteran teachers who might be willing to move to an area or work a little bit farther away to make up for that income loss.
Are you making a pitch for year-to-year salary match, Paula? Okay.
It's serving Castro Valley well.
Yeah. Others on this topic? Year-to-year salary match. So we're in the discussion of like these ideas.
I would have to agree with Paula. The district I teach in accepts all years. And it serves as a way to retain our educators who may be coming up to a certain point where the surrounding districts no longer take a certain number of years. The districts around you take up to 10 years. So you come up on your 10th year and you have to make this decision. Am I staying here? Am I going to move? Am I going to go somewhere else? So I think it helps to recruit folks to our district because we do accept all years, and it sort of gives other people options. So I think it's a great idea. I definitely think out of our list, the paid student teaching is really important for recruiting educators and widening that teacher pipeline. And I had a question about the prep time. I know on the graph it says prep for elementary teachers, but was the MBI specific to secondary teachers?
Let's go. Adam, can you go back to that original NBI? And it would have been, it was NBI 102213.
Yeah, it says all teachers, but
all teachers.
Was it specific?
So we'll click on the original NBI as was submitted.
Okay. Again, I know that in secondary, teachers get a prep every day. In our district, elementary teachers get prep once a week. So this sounds very secondary, especially during the past year or two when we have a lack of subs. Teachers have been asked to give up their prep period to cover classes. But again, it's volunteer only and they are paid. I mean, in these situations, it's less than ideal, but it's a way to get classes covered when we have such a severe sub shortage. I don't know if that works in elementary school. So it sounds like this is mostly secondary language. But I would encourage elementary prep for elementary teachers because it does provide more support. People are able to get a little more of their work done without taking it home.
Okay. I see a hand raised. Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Verkeilen, Association of Pleasanton Teachers and State Council CPD. Just wanted to piggyback on what you're talking about with the elementary prep. I actually do think this was probably aimed towards elementary teachers having a prep every day because there is a disparity between elementary and secondary where somehow magically it's been assumed into schedules that at the secondary level, everybody gets a prep. And for some reason, that is not the same at elementary. And the various districts and what they get, like when I hear that you only have one prep a week, like my first question is, does that mean you have external preps every other day? In my district, we either have, depending on your grade level at elementary, either 4 or 5 preps a week. And that doesn't necessarily fall, like sometimes you might have a double prep, but just the equity between knowing that everybody has to prep, and why do secondary teachers get that time every day and elementary doesn't? It just boggles my mind. So just that's my kind of 2 cents on that issue.
I just want to jump in real quick. It's Stephen Billick from UTLA, and I'm actually on negotiations, and I can speak a little bit about what we did here. And I think a lot of this has to do with your individual bargaining and kind of the hesitation to go with the statewide policy. And I do want to point out that it is interesting. A lot of what we're looking at does take place in the bargaining side. So what resources are we looking for that are bargaining related versus directly impacting our new educators? And that's kind of the difference I want to draw between versus things like bargaining that you're doing that new educators have, so to speak, no part of, because they shouldn't be on the new bargaining campaign if they're within their first year, versus something like New Ed where they're going to that or participating in that. So I'm looking at solutions that might directly benefit them, and I'll keep brainstorming those while we're sitting here. But I did want to speak briefly about the salary matching. That is something that will benefit teacher retention as they move across. However, we're looking at accepting years after. So when we're talking years 7, 8, 9, and 10, that is past year 5, which is when the big issue is we're losing educators up until year 5. So we're looking at how do we keep someone at year 3 when salary matching isn't really as much of a concern as it is for someone who's in year 10. So that's just something I wanted to put out there to keep in mind. But again, a lot of the issues we saw in negotiations were based on, it's going to differ based on the bargaining unit that you have for your district.
Thank you, Stephen. And before Esther, you start, all of our solutions do not have to be legislative solutions, right? So like, that's always where I phone home, right? Because that's the work that my staff do, right? So they can be bargaining solutions. Is it a bargaining recommendation for our units to be doing something different, right? So, excuse me, sorry for interjecting. Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, no worries. I agree that, we really want to be conscientious about the decisions or the recommendations that we're making. And also, to the point of bargaining, I think it becomes also like whatever the local units language is around prep. Because in our district, when it comes to a multiple subject setting, the prep is now being folded into like before school hours or after school hours and not necessarily during the day. So just to kind of be conscientious about like, when it comes to the local level, like if that's the space in which it's going to happen, just to make sure that folks know exactly what when they say a prep, what it means and time. And then around a little bit around the salary matching, I think a point was very well raised, even in terms of like the focus of our attention, right, being within a smaller time frame than the salary matching, because we're not really hearing that the salary matching is a strong consideration for folks that are like under that 10-year frame. So just to kind of like continue to reiterate that point.
Thank you. Paula?
I think this particular one could probably be tied in as an elementary teacher too, who doesn't get, well, I do get preps. I'm TK. We get a prep every day. We're fortunate, but most don't. We just had the law passed where there's funding for arts and music. And that would be a great one to tie in for elementary for a prep. If you have those arts and music teachers who can come in and teach those lessons now that it's finally funded, that could be a prep right there. So maybe that's something that we could work with in conjunction with an existing bill that just passed, or law. Keep saying a bill, it's a law now. There could be a tie-in with that prep right there, if that's something we pursue.
Okay, I'm looking to see any other raised hands. So we're kind of like all over the map on our subject area, right? As far as what we're looking at, I've heard paid student teachers didn't seem to be controversial, at least not right now, not yet. Year-to-year salary match, still an effort for that. Not sure if it's legislative or a directive to the field, right? And prep time for elementary educators, possible tool to do the new arts and music initiative, and tie that to prep time for elementary educators. Does that sound right?
I have some maybe some added pieces to it. I don't know if this is the right time to plug this in, but along with the like we spoke about the barriers, like the financial barriers to be in test prep. So in CPD, you know, we tried to we tried to support the pandemic teachers by killing the ed TPA for them, and came across a huge roadblock. Like the insistence on having those test preps is really strong from that end, but we just keep hearing over and over and over from our newest educators how much like they would rather just quit than have to face these tests. They're like insurmountable. So I'm just wondering like a reduction in this, you know, it's a removal of those barriers of when, especially when they're already teaching, they're already next door, and they're so it's clearly not an indicator of, you know, that kind of reform. I mean, we tried to do it in the short term with just this pandemic group, so you know, and it we couldn't even do it for that group. So I know that's like a big, huge thing, but it is a thing, and it is a thing that that we've heard over and over as prohibitive or something that they don't want to go through. It's and right now my own district, they're going through an audit, so they're being really conservative and basically letting anyone who's any probationary that they're not sure about, they're just letting them go. So I don't know how we're gonna, it's the worst timing because they're letting all these, you know, that should be on some sort of waiver, they're just gonna make them all reapply, which is ridiculous. But I think we're not the only ones. I think that the amount of waiver new teachers on waiver that get cycled in and cycled out because they come across problems with RICA or one test or another, I think that's a sizable population that we should, if we're going to talk about retention, that would be a triage area, I think.
And I know Adam is on, and I don't know if he wants to talk about this or plans to talk about this tomorrow, right, during his session.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Angela mentioned, the sort of the effort to provide relief to the teachers that were granted preliminary credentials during the COVID area due to an executive order allowing for that flexibility are now sort of they find themselves in this awful situation of having to figure out how to be a new teacher, how to complete their induction process, and they have the TPA and in some cases RICA hanging over their head. And we have, you know, we have heard, and generally from our members, just a deep antipathy for the TPA, not because, you know, we don't believe in quality, but because it detracts from what people really find important in teaching, namely the sort of the clinical practice mentoring experiences. So in CPD, we did a consensus activity and we sort of reached consensus and then developed some guidelines around which we're going to develop policy for performance-based assessment. And so that will be, in much in the same way that Lori brought back some of the NBIs and the outcomes, we'll be taking up the TPA tomorrow evening. Shameless plug. You are welcome to join all of the focus area groups. So if you'd like to join us tomorrow to go deep into the TPA, we would love to have you there.
I agree completely with everything Angela said. Being someone who took the TPA just a little while ago and having gone through it, it's frustrating to hear other teachers when you meet them say like, oh, you did, you know, when I took bits, I had to smile and they just put me on through. And these are phenomenal teachers versus now when they're, you know, you have to jump through 18 things and then it's got good enough, especially with the hiring shortage. So doing something like that, looking at when we started this, why we started this, and possibly restructuring would be really smart. And I also am looking at, you know, with ideas, possibly adding more to our new educator work. I'm a part of the new ed committee, the new ed conference, which I love, but maybe putting more into that, maybe creating some smaller programs that can be run through the regions, doing more than just 2 conferences a year, which is a lot anyway, but keeping that offering there might also help boost recruitment and retention. I think primarily retention with our brand new educators, giving them an opportunity. Just off the top of my head, looking at some of the folks that we have going to New Ed North and New Ed South and going, do you want to go to what's it good NEA leadership, which they can't do because it's the same weekend, but you get the idea where you find someone and go, hey, do you want to go to the, and just that idea where there are certain things that we would never think to send someone in their first 3 years to, if they were exposed to this part of our union, it might get them more involved and help strengthen their abilities with their teaching as well.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So more in the space of with our new educators as an organization.
Yeah, conferences, any kind of events that bring them together would definitely, I think, help.
I'm curious to know what knowledge our CTA colleagues have around the federal, I'm lacking on the word, a memo came out like in August at some time from the education secretary, something Corona, about federal funding for an apprenticeship program. And I'm curious to know that at a state level, you know, is there any forward movement on that? Because that's part of like the recruitment and the retention aspect. And it came across our radar because of our, one of the leaders in the union that was connected to our program shared it for us to be able to look at a possibility of applying for a grant. And I'm just curious to know if any of our CTA colleagues have any information or knowledge of that as an opportunity to think of like one, a kind of grow your own program with apprenticeship and also in conjunction with like residency programs as a funding stream that could potentially be an opportunity for, you know, LEAs to be exploring to apply for this funding stream, as well as, you know, thinking about what the redesign or what the design, if they don't have one, of a grow your own program might look like. And then we can kind of discuss a little bit about what those, you know, credentialing requirements may be.
Lori, I'm going to take that.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm going to turn my video off because I have a very bad connection. Okay, that's better. Sorry. Great question, Esther. If you want to tune in for that details, that's Thursday of our pipeline. But I can give you sort of a preview. Adam, Leslie, and myself are part of the work group that started in California through the Department of Labor. And we are meeting to explore our residence apprenticeships within California. And the conversation is around residencies, apprenticeships, paid student teaching, sort of all of that is on the table. But we just had one meeting. They're going to be monthly meetings. And we don't have much details other than sort of was a get to know meeting just occurred a few weeks ago. And we could probably have more information shared on Thursday, where they are looking at having 2 to 3 apprenticeship models be pilots for next year. That's their goal. So identifying 2 to 3 sort of locals with district collaboration who are willing to participate in a pilot, but we don't have any details of how they're going to identify these pilots.
Okay.
I have a question about that. Does that include when they talk about these grow your own programs, are these programs that are going to start within high schools? to start
No,
recruiting
this would
those
be
kids?
right. No, this is just an apprenticeship program. So the apprenticeship would be basically teachers who are being paid or student teachers who are being paid to go through their operation. Now our conversations about on-ramps. So there's a second component to this, which is like, how do we on-ramp our individuals into the teaching profession? So that's a separate conversation to figure out how you on-ramp people and support them if they're interested in the teaching profession. So we haven't gotten too far into what that would look like, but that would be sort of the high school component.
I think that's one of the first steps that needs to happen, is that Lori's heard me say this before, so sorry, Lori, if I sound like a broken record. We need to have pathways for education in high school. We have them for so many other professions, healthcare, computers. I don't know, my son didn't choose a career pathway, all those different things, but I know of no high school in our areas, the Bay Area, that does it for education. So how, if we want to truly grow our own and have our kids see themselves represented in the classrooms where they live, and we want them to come back and teach, we need to create that pipeline right there at a high school level. And I know there are some, when I said this to our EC committee, there was someone in there who said, we do that in our county, somewhere out in the valley, and Central Valley here in California. And well, obviously California was state council. But anyway, I'm like, that was the first time I've really heard of it happening. So when I think of grow your own, that's what I'm thinking, is like, what are the pathways to get people even into the door? And whether it's a community college, a state or a UC or private, where is that pathway? Because that's how we really grow our own, is to have them see in high school that being a teacher is a viable career option and a very rewarding one.
Yeah, in California, and several. They're called academies, and they're with high schools. And so it depends on the school or the district where we offer that pathway. But there are several in Southern California that I know. I see Angela put that Fullerton had one, but those are all local decisions.
And how can we as CTA push for more of those? Like, what can we work with legislators to help come up with these things? I mean, it's not something we can bargain. Those seems like they're LCFF things. I don't know. But how can we do more to get those kids interested?
I guess the question is, Angela's responding to a couple of them. So how are those programs, I guess, run now, right? Like, is there statutory authority now that like, do we need to have something, or are school districts able to do it already? And how are they doing it? Like, what is their funding stream, right? Are they using their LCAP to do this, or did they add it to career pathways, right? Is it, what did they do to do that? I don't have that information.
I don't either. And I wonder if it's one of those things, what do they call it? There's a name for it when kids can take classes their junior and senior years in conjunction with community college. It's usually run through the adult schools, and I'm blanking on the name of that.
Dual enrollment.
Dual enrollment. I mean, is that something we can look, can there be dual enrollment programs offered by community colleges that would support students moving into that career instead of just the typical things that are offered? What about dual enrollment education? If an LEA doesn't want to offer a pathway, can we look at that as a way to get kids into education as a career?
I know that it is really incumbent upon the LEA to really kind of seek out, what are some recruitment pathways and opportunities around the area. But I'm just also wondering, at a bigger, broader level, what opportunities are there for some guidance around like partnerships and intentional partnerships with like after school programs, or outdoor ed programs. Those have been, really instrumental in terms of recruitment for our programs in the past, to be able to get folks who are already working with students, and maybe they just need to add a credential to their to be able to come into the classroom space or to explore other teaching opportunities. So, kind of piggybacking on what Paula was saying, is like doing the dual enrollment program as one pathway. And then for folks who are already in teaching settings, how do we kind of like maybe codify those partnerships a little bit more on a bigger, broader level versus just the local level?
So we have on the screen all the issues that we looked at previously, and we're going to change screens in just a few minutes, but I wanted to make sure from this list, and you don't have to land on it now, I'm hearing year-to-year salary match as an option, but like I'll when we actually land on 1 to 5 things we're recommending, we can revisit that. Prep time for elementary teachers, paid student teaching, are those 3 from this list that don't answer me now, but like just keep those in mind. So when we're going to narrow down the 1 to 5 things that we're going to recommend to the whole group, we're keeping some of these, not keeping them, because we're going to talk about what is like actionable, what action would it take, and what would we want to see, right? So we're going to like try to evaluate each one of these things, and then also new ideas too. So I have Lisa, and then I had Keisha.
I was just wondering, these ideas came from a poll at State Council. Is that what you said? Or survey, excuse me?
No, great question. So we had a several meetings in December, and these were ideas that were previous legislations from many years, right? And other brainstorming ideas. So like, we brainstorm educator supporter housing, loan forgiveness. We brainstorm prep time for elementary, paid student teaching. Year-to-year salary match has been a legislative proposal in the past. The minimum teacher salary was a proposal under Jack O'Connell's, when he was a legislator, right? And we actually supported it. Class size reduction, that was like a number one thing when we talked about QEI. So some of these came from previous legislative work, and we ranked them within this work group about how we would, and this was just a way to get us started. So this was a brainstorming tool that we're still using now, or if we still want to keep these ideas, or, move on to others.
Okay. If we have ideas that are not part of this, can we share them now, or is that another section?
Yeah, we're going to do that now, right? So I just wanted to leave this screen, and I'm going to answer Keisha's question. Then we're going to go to, ideas that we can start to generate, either building off of these ideas, abandoning these, or moving on to new ones. Keisha?
So thinking about Stephen's comment about retaining teachers at the up to 5-year mark, I think it might be helpful to separate some of these into groups, like which are most helpful for recruitment, and maybe which are the top 5 for retention, because these are sort of all over the board right now. So I think it might be helpful to focus maybe the top 3 for recruitment purposes, the top 3 for retention, because those are very different groups of educators that we're talking about, who have different needs and different priorities. And so it may be hard to just make one list that applies to every teacher. That's just my suggestion.
Good point. Absolutely. You're talking about different audiences, right? Absolutely. So we're going to go on to the next slide, Adam. This is just really, the idea, what we were trying to do is, when we're talking about these recommendations, and I like the idea of separating out recruitment and retention. I think it's an excellent idea. If somebody objects, please let me know. I think that makes sense. Clear and specific, what is actionable? And like Stephen brought up the point, maybe not everything is a legislative fix. Things could be internal to the organization, or they can be recommendations for bargaining and strategies within our local associations. So clear and specific, actionable, and the potential for impact, right? Like, how does that get us to that larger goal of dealing with the diversity, equity, and inclusion too? So I think we're ready for new ideas and or building off other ones. So Lisa, was there anything you wanted to share in this section?
Oh, yes. So I wanted to go back to, I remember when we met in person, we spent a lot of time looking at the HEART research, the survey of new teachers, and there was a lot of information in there, but as working in the human rights department, of course, I honed in on the information about our BIPOC teachers and how a lot of them felt alienated and isolated on campus. So I was thinking about the idea of, in the non-education world, they have what's called employee resource groups. And it's just a way for different it's a way to get like different people together, even if it's virtually. So maybe coming up with like a model that districts could adopt, so they could bring their underrepresented communities together, those educators, like Black educators, LGBTQ educators together, so they could support one another, at least let them know that they're not alone, or that they're not forgotten. And so I'm not proposing that CTA run these. Yeah, we could start like on our own, but I think maybe a piloting, like there's a friendly LEA that might want to pilot such a thing with us. But I think maybe just providing districts a blueprint of how to get it started would be kind of a low cost and something that could be implemented pretty quickly. Not that quickness is that important. It wouldn't take like 2 legislative cycles or anything like that.
Anybody have questions about that for Lisa?
Please don't have any questions, because I haven't thought about it more than what I just shared with you. It's a brainstorm.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, building upon that, idea, we're talking about that clear and specific, actionable, and potential for impact. So like, is this something you want to, or does this group want to explore this more and, bring it on the 23rd as a potential idea?
I mean, I think it sounds like a really good idea to provide a safe space for, educators of color, people of color in general, where they can convene, where they can come together to, vent, support each other, see each other, and, provide advice. I think with that obviously comes a whole other list of guidelines and what's the word I'm looking for? Norms, I guess, if you will. And there's a little bit more that goes into allowing for such a space for people to come together. And I think it's all a really good idea. I would just add to Lisa's point that if CTA were to provide a model for a friendly LEA to go with, that we include and think about and include all of those pieces that, that can kind of preempt some of the potential pitfalls and issues that our folks may encounter, in addition to the benefit that having this space would provide.
So just a quick question, Lori, before we go to Stephen, just for process, the implication would be, and is this correct? It would be sort of titled, it would be focused on retention. It would be titled something along the line of supportive affinity spaces for educators. And then would the idea then be that Lisa and whomever wished to join Lisa in developing this idea would further vet the idea, find research, find supporting information, kind of build out the idea a little bit more and bring that back to the 23rd meeting?
That is the idea. Yes.
Okay. Sorry to jump in front of you, Stephen.
No problem. I actually have more on this, and I love Lisa's idea. I think it's fantastic, and I know I brought it up before, but I'm going to keep bringing it up because it's important, and I think it's good to know when we're talking about new educator retention, and that is the new educator groups that are available in other states. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put a little bit of information in the chat about Ohio. Now, other states don't have to, they have more of a need than we do because they are right to work, so they have to organize a lot more. But these states already have these resources built in. So some of the things they offer would be leadership development, professional growth, and then there's that localized peer-to-peer support they have throughout their state, where they have these support groups for your BIPOC educators. You have support groups for your different types of educators. They form these, the work's been done already. And they have a fantastic track record. And not only do they support their educators, these groups also then mobilize around educator issues. Something similar to the TPAs that we were talking about happened in Ohio, and it was because of this group that they got those things pushed aside a few years ago. And it was because of this group, and this group is called One. It's Ohio's New Educators. It's a great name, and One is kind of the top winner when it comes to new ed groups within the 50 states. They're probably pretty much the best. But I highly encourage looking at this framework as well as others, knowing that we don't necessarily need to have the same infrastructure they do, because they have to recruit a lot more, because they're losing members a lot more than we are. Same thing with Florida. They have a group called FIRE, which is, again, their names are really good. But Florida has to have this recruitment because they need the funds. So looking into a program like this and starting something like this in California, helping our locals build this out and helping then regionalize some of this work, I think would be really helpful for continuing some of Lisa's ideas and some of the other things we've been talking about today.
Okay, very helpful.
So before we
go
go to
ahead.
Paula, would that be, Stephen, help me here with a fair summary? Would that be, and Lisa, please feel free to critique the summary below or modify it. So Stephen, would your idea be develop or strengthen CTA supports for early career educators, like One, and then add this as a reference?
Yeah, so it's going beyond what Lisa brought up, and then there's multiple dimensions you can add to that. And I think maybe taking it one step at a time, but they have that part of it as part of their program, and there are other states as well. But they also have professional development, and they also have leadership support as well. So those are the kind of three main pillars. And one of those pillars is exactly what Lisa was talking about.
So would this be a separate idea or a component of Lisa's idea?
I would say a separate idea, and hopefully they can kind of merge together and become a separate idea for now. And then over time, they can get fleshed out to hopefully we get to the same goal, ensuring that work gets done.
Got it. Thank you.
So we have Paula.
Well, in addition to we need to recruit kids in high school grant, I also think about people like myself who were education is a second career. I never, ever, ever thought I'd be a teacher in my lifetime. And yet here I am. So how do we recruit people as a second career? Because many second career people already have their bachelor's degree. They might even have a master's. They just need that credential component. So how do we get to those people that are ready to change careers midlife and start something new? There's a whole lot of people out there that are probably ready for a career change like this that just don't even know it because they never thought about it. So how do we hit those people? Now, my boss told me, and I can't remember what it is, my principal said there is a state that is doing a great job at it, and I promised to find that what that was, that is completely focused on second career people becoming educators. So I'll find out what that state was and what the program was, because he told me about it a long time ago, and I'll say, what was it you were talking about? Because it specifically was targeting those people as educators. So we always often think about, get those kids in college, but there's also the people that already have established themselves.
Okay, Adam is doing a wonderful job in transcribing here.
And my big giant long run on sentence. In fact, I'm going to text my admin right now and ask him what that program was.
One of our challenges that we run into with second career educators is the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision, right? The government pension offset, right? It's the second career in which your pension will be reduced by your Social Security amount, which we haven't been able to overcome, which is one of our obstacles. So other brainstorming ideas. Sorry, I'm turning off my phone. Apologies.
This is Angela. This is something that hasn't been brought up formally, but it bubbled up a lot at this last state council, and I'm just predicting this to be something that we should probably get ahead of, is the burnout factor. So this goes under the retention. So because I know we've been focusing on 0 to 5s and attracting, but if we're corroding the pipeline at the other end because people are burning out. So the comments I kept hearing, and they were mostly coming out of places like school safety and that just people talking in those committees or around those committees and school supports about students coming with needs that are above our pay grade and above our expertise, where they're really needing a lot more. The ratio of counseling came up, that it's not servicing kids in a way, and it's really impacting classroom environments, basically, because you're having kids that are being violent, and then you have to evacuate I just heard so many stories this weekend. So there was a lot of questions about MBIs and possible, what can we do about this? So I'm just hearing that as a trend and thinking, well, that's going to lead to burnout when people can't manage. They may be great teachers, but if the conditions are changing because of the kids' needs, then maybe we need to do something about that as well. So just putting it out there.
Do they offer any solutions in that space other than hiring additional staff for schools?
Yeah, it was one was specifically around he wanted to look at the impact of stress on teachers because of these things. But I think it, the roads lead to, if it's adding stress, that's where I sort of thought that, but no, it was mostly around extra like building more language into the community schools model about getting more staffing. Yeah, but it all centered around staffing. But I was thinking even just there was one that came out of this was a couple cycles ago, but it was about the idea of giving induction teachers group sort of counseling talk themselves, so that they were used to sort of that model of having group discussions, that was sort of more built in, so that was one way to address both teachers' mental health as well as kids' mental health. So building, I think that was one of the proposals, and I haven't seen it come across. They were just floated, but I just keep noticing this, more and more people asking about that sort of thing.
Keisha?
So a couple of things. To address what Angela was just talking about, I know folks have been hearing about community schools a lot, but community schools really are transformative. They really are individualized to the needs of that school community. And there's someone on staff whose sole job is to find resources for students and for families to support them in whatever they need. And I think we all know that kids bring to class whatever they're experiencing at home and in their community. And so if the community schools can really address those areas of need and trauma and everything else that our kids bring to our classroom, I think that can address a lot of the behaviors that teachers are seeing now. So I think that is also another pathway, which is really focusing on the needs of the community. I also had a question about these ideas. So are we surfacing new ideas, or are we trying to pick the top 2 or 3 from our other list?
So
I'm a little confused right now.
Right. I'm just the list was to put things in context. You can continue to pursue whatever you want to from the original list, because that was just an idea generator, and re-rank them. So any of these, or whatever you want, we can put them in the box of recruitment attention, as well as new ideas. This was just to revisit what we had already done. So if you like the idea of paid student teaching as a recruitment issue, right, and we'll put it in that bucket. I'm not saying that's what you love, but if you love that, that's what we can put in that bucket, right? As well as probably teacher loan forgiveness would probably be a recruitment issue as well. So that's entirely up to you. If we look at, and the idea of work is going to have to go on in the interim, right? We have this meeting tonight, and then then we have our next meeting, which is not until the 23rd. So there has to be like some interim work within subsets of this group to say, this is an idea we're exploring. This is the evidence. This is what we're going to present. You know, nothing is written in stone other than this is what our thoughts are to the entire, work group. Does that help? So do you want to start with this list and like take a couple from here and put them into recruitment and retention, or you all let me know?
Well, I have a question of seeing as how we discuss it in negotiations, how many of these ideas that we bring forward would then be decided that that's a local or that's a negotiated issue versus something that's more based on legislative or interior?
So, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, this is the work that we do. If it is a legislative fix, right? We know that route. Clearly having to work with our negotiations if we need to change any of our policy to pursue a piece of legislation. If in fact we take the advice of the negotiations committee, right? Or we have more conversation. So like I'm saying, nothing is off the table, right? If we say we like the idea of year-to-year salary match, but we don't like it as an idea of a statewide mandate in which we need to pursue legislation, that's entirely up to you. But if you say we like year-to-year salary match and C4OB, you really should be working with all of our locals and our PCSs to help work that as a bargaining tool, right? Like, and so I can't make that decision. You guys can, and the greater work group can, and the board of directors can. But like all of those options are on the table. We just have to take different routes in order to get there. Is that helpful?
It does. And I just, because the first two, if you're not bargaining those locally, what are you doing? I mean, that's just, I look at like everybody should be working on class reduction and salary all of the time. So I know that we all kind of feel the same way.
So I'm not sure who was next. If it was Keisha or Paula. So,
Paula the Keisha.
okay, go Paula.
Okay, it wouldn't have mattered to me. But I know as someone who was here when we had class size reduction, it matters. So as much as you can say bargain it, as soon as class size reduction went away, sanctioned by the government, it went away in contracts. We had K3 go from 20-1 to 30-1. As much as you want to bargain it, when it was bad in 2008 and 2009, and we were losing teachers who had 5, 6, 7 years seniority, that was one of the things they did. It's like it was gone, it went away. And there are still a lot of LEAs that have 30 kids in kindergarten. So class size reduction is huge. As much as we say bargain it, bargain it, bargain it, it's only as good as your bargaining team is. And we know some have, and this isn't a disparaging remark on anyone, right? Some bargaining teams are stronger than others, and it might have to do with the LEA they're working with. It's a lot easier to be a smaller suburban bargaining team than a large urban. So I think if we can get those legislative powers that be to get back in things like mandatory class size reductions where the penalties are so significant they don't want to break it like we used to have. I don't know what the exact terms were when we had 20-1. Laura, you would know. I don't know what it was. I just knew it was class size reduction. And it makes a huge difference. And one of the things that concerns me as we see we need 12,000 to 16,000 educators just for TK, they said there would be 24-2, 20-2 if the money allowed. The money's not, we're not hearing the money's going to be there. So as those kids get younger and younger, and we'll start having super young 4-year-olds, older 3-year-olds come into those TK classes, you're not going to have a lot of teachers that want to teach 24 kids with some of them being 3. And it's way above preschool staffing ratios. So the more we can get that as a legislative thing, technical terms, I'm kind of tired today, then the better off we are, because school districts don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. And just to hear already, like I said, I know we don't know if the money will be there or not for 20-2. And LEAs will staff at 24-2 if at all possible. So C4OB can be on it, but we really need the law to back us up on class size.
Keisha and then Michelle.
So I'm just thinking it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or situation. I think I kind of agree with some of the rationale that the negotiations committee provided, in that it is bargaining. It is something that locals decide is their priority. For some folks, you can't have increased salary, class size reduction, and elementary prep. So locals have to make decisions. What's the priority for them? So I do agree that it is a bargaining issue, and it's up to the locals to decide and the members to really say, this is what we want. But I also agree with Paula, class size reduction, it was legislated. It was able to be legislated by the state. The districts had to follow those ratios. So why can't we do both? We know legislation takes a long time to happen. So in the meantime, those districts that do want to bargain for class size or elementary prep time or higher salaries, C4OB can provide that bargaining support. I know there's contract language online that locals can access, but I think some targeted outreach, some targeted support on sort of packaging it as teacher recruitment and retention bargaining can also be helpful. So I don't know if it's just class size reduction, but doing both, supporting bargaining, providing bargaining support, and going for class size reduction legislation.
Okay, Michelle.
So I just want to piggyback on some things people are saying, and I apologize, my voice is gone. I've been fighting a sinus infection, but so I have to say, so Steve, I was glad to hear you say, well, I don't know if people aren't bargaining those things. I don't understand what they're bargaining for. But then yet you're coming from the negotiations committee that's saying, well, it's up to every bargaining unit. So I really believe at a bigger scale, kind of what Paul is saying, the same thing with class size reduction, but also for me on salary. If we're looking at trying to recruit people, whether they are brand new teachers or teachers who are happy doing a second career, if we don't have some kind of a minimum criteria for entry level teachers, you're just not going to get them. There's too much competition out there in other fields where if they come in and maybe they'll try it out and then they see what the working conditions are, they're just going to say it's not worth it. And they're going to go somewhere else where they can make more money. So I don't understand, and granted, I'm not on negotiation subcommittee, why we would put restrictions on ourselves for saying what we think is important that will actually help us recruit and retain teachers. I think anytime there's legislation that says that mandates districts have to do things, it actually, the dollars go there. We have more spending in California per student than we've ever had before. And every local is having to fight for a piece of that money. And we shouldn't have to fight for it. If it was legislated, we could bargain and negotiate things on a more local level that would be really tied to what our communities need and that stuff. But having to fight for reasonable and maintainable salaries shouldn't be one of them. So that is my soapbox for tonight. Thank you.
And Michelle, I
Thank
can
you.
speak to that just a little bit. I know that one of the things that came up in negotiations was the differences in district salary and the fear that if we were to put a minimum and the district realized that they pay over that minimum, immediately cutting the salaries of those new educators because they'd rather hit the minimum. And that was one of the fears that came up was, well, we're paying you 10 grand over, so we're going to cut back. That was just one of the things that came up.
So just a quick time check. We're at 5:47. We have about 13 more minutes left on the call. We have to get to the part where we wash these through the criteria, and then we all assign people who will do further vetting of the ideas. Just wanted to kind of do a time check.
Thank you, Adam. So of the original list, do we want to keep anything? Move anything off the list?
Lori, are you talking about this list or the?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the list where we prioritized, at least, you don't have to keep any of this, but I'm just saying, I just want to, if we're going to be done with that list, or you're going to still consider those items. So like paid student teaching. Do we want to continue with that idea and put it under recruitment?
Yes.
Is anybody objecting to that? Keisha, did you want to raise your hand again?
Well, I was just looking at number one, strengthen supports for early career educators. That could be any number of things beyond just the example that Stephen shared. It could be support in the induction program. I know many of our educators have missed out on the induction program or can't afford to pay for the induction program. And so the pandemic screwed up their timelines. to complete induction. So there's induction support, there's paid student teaching, there's a lot of locals have a buddy program where they have mentor teachers assigned to brand new educators. So I think supports for early career educators could be any number of things. And I think class size reduction is huge. We have it under retention. And prep. I think prep is just another support for all educators. I don't know if that's on there.
And the prep time specifically was tied to potentially the Arts and Music Initiative, right, Paula? That was your suggestion. How do we feel about that? I'm getting a thumbs up. And it could be that could be just an organizing piece because the money will be there after, starting in July.
I also wanted to still leave in the apprenticeship models. I think those exploring the different types of models, especially the ones where some of the testing is rolled in so that there's it goes with those gatekeep testing. Fresno has the ed TPAs built in. So I think those would be worth exploring and supporting.
Angela, are you okay with the focus area group tomorrow taking that up?
Yep.
Okay. So we have 6 ideas on the table so far, Laurie.
Right, and there's the one that was around prep time and tying that to the Arts and Music Initiative, which I'm guessing would be under retention.
And can I ask Keisha a question? Keisha, when you were saying about induction support, were you adding induction support in general or having paid induction for individuals so that?
Well, not requiring the individual to have to pay for it.
So paid induction, yeah. Okay.
I mean, we've bargained that our district provides induction support for our new educators. But that's only like a limited amount, and then the rest have to pay for it themselves through the various universities in the city.
Right. Yeah, there used to be districts used to offer paid induction, and then they left the onus onto individuals to go find some type of higher ed program that they have to pay out of pocket and join, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Just had that question.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add on what Keisha said about my idea, which is it is very broad. I specifically mean like the foundation of maybe a statewide group with those targets in mind. So modeling that structure that is from other states that would play into recruitment and retention. So that group specifically, we would take that model and implement it here, and that would help with induction support, affinity-based support groups, and other things.
And Stephen, just to ask another clarifying question, for that group, is that group through the local association or it's just a state group?
It is a statewide group. So one is a statewide group. It's an offshoot of OEA, Ohio. And then same thing with Florida as well. It's I wouldn't say it's committee. It's almost like a separate, it's an organization within. They have their own, and this is of course much bigger than we would have because it took years, but they have their own leaders, they have their own staff actually that work for that group specifically. And for example, it would be that group that puts on new ed in adding it to our end. It would be, if we had a similar structure, it would be that group that puts on the new ed conference or does things throughout the year that support new educators throughout the state, helping LEAs figure out how you can support educators in your area. So it's a full-on program. Theirs is of course much bigger than what we would start out with, but we would look at their infrastructure at least and say, well, can we copy?
How
So
does
they're
it-
with, they're still part of the, sorry, Angela, they're still part of the association,
are.
but it's like, it's within the organization. It's sort of like a department or an entity within the association.
Right. It's almost like student CTA, but with members
Got it.
and staff.
Okay, thank you. I just needed to clarify that. Thank you. Sorry, Angela.
No, that was my question, was how does this differ from student CTA?
It's almost like the next step of student CTA.
So we have 4 ideas under recruitment and 4 under retention. So some of these things we probably need to specify if they are legislative in nature or bargaining in nature. Because I think that will depend on what our approach is. So paid induction, because it is locally negotiated now, that would be a legislative fix. Right. Is that what I'm hearing under recruitment number 2? Okay, saying nods. And paid student teaching, obviously, as a mandate as well, requiring school districts to pay for student teaching. Item 1, I'm just trying to help us narrow the work we have into chunks that we can manage. So item 1, support for I'm sorry, I had to move my screen around. Early educators. So that's more of an internal recommendation. Got it. And item 3, program to recruit second career educators, career teachers. Also more of an internal group. Yes. Or internal work. And please, anybody jump in if I got this wrong. Minimum teacher salary. So that would be a legislative, because it would have to tie with additional, state budget funding. So I think the point of the negotiations committee was like, if you put a minimum on teacher salaries without providing the additional money and resources, you will have an adverse impact locally, right? So we'll talk about that. Is there a question, Keisha?
Yeah, I think just having a minimum number is problematic for all the reasons that have been brought up. I think perhaps a salary related to some index or some, like, it has to be relative to the community where those people are teaching, because a minimum salary for Los Angeles is not going to be the same minimum requirement for, say, somewhere up in Northern California, a tiny town with like 3 schools. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't put an arbitrary number on it, but it perhaps an index, a percentage related to the cost of living in that area. I just think if you just say minimum salary, there's going to be arguments against it for various reasons.
And I think that's why the NBI was worded the way it was worded. It's going exactly to what you're saying, because you're right. No, there can't be one number for everybody across the state of California.
So is it a legislative fix? You're going to want the legislature to determine the index of the state minimum salary for LA, San Diego, because that's what it means. So we have the asterisk legislative. And so that's what this idea is. is a mandate on minimum teacher salary.
That's a slippery slope, I think. The more we talk about it, the more it actually really concerns me.
I think we should leave it to bargaining for now until we can think of something not so problematic. I think it raises more questions.
So maybe I'm old, but I remember there was a time when they did do this. It was I can't remember the legislator's name, but it raised it to like, don't laugh, 35,000 for starting. Don't laugh, because when I taught, I started at way less than 35,000. So that was a big deal at the time. And I'm just bringing this up because I was just wondering if there is, like, we can look at the history of that, like all the arguments people are bringing, against this. I'm wondering if those were addressed when that happened. I don't know, Lori, do you remember?
Yeah, no, it was Jack O'Connell's bill.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
a minimum teacher salary and it was voluntary.
Oh, it was
So,
voluntary.
and this
Okay.
is at a time when we had base revenue limits and categorical programs. And if you chose to do the minimum salary, right, you of course negotiated it. Your formula was adjusted upward for those additional, and this was like 20 some years ago. So
Yeah.
it was literally it said, I think it was 34,000 as we talked about in December.
Mhm.
And so that was the minimum back then. And so, it is that it would be at this point when it was a mandate, right? Because the bill had a couple pieces of history. One of it, it was first a mandate. Actually, it was Jackie Goldberg, I think, at the time, who introduced a statewide mandated minimum salary. God love her for that. But the school boards objected to it. Nobody was ever going to happen. So they actually made it to be an incentive for school districts to get up to that minimum, right?
Yeah, so it's a combo then. It's a combo ledge and negotiation. So I don't know what the feasibility of trying to get something like that again.
And would you have it indexed to each region of the state? So the minimum in San Francisco would be X, Y, and Z. And so like it's a matter of, I don't want to get into your debate, my apologies, but like that would be what it would take, right? So like indexed per regions of the state, the formula would be tweaked. So, and then you're talking about like a straight budget ask, right? To get you up to that new level. And then what if you are above that level? It's the scenario that Steve talked about was, reducing teacher salaries, right?
Yeah.
Because they were already above that.
I think you'd have to put a no takebacks in there, or make only districts that have, that their starting is lower than what it could be, it's eligible. I mean, I hesitate to answer all those questions because I mean, there are ledge advocates and people who know more about this, like you, Lori, that could come up with different scenarios. I don't know that we need to have like the specifics of it.
So just a time check.
Back in the day with the thing with O'Connell, if there were districts that did try to lower their salaries that they had?
I don't know.
Okay.
So just a quick time check. We are 3 minutes over the allotted time. We have a larger list than 5. And so I suppose the question is, a couple of questions. Are we, do we want to stay a little bit longer? And if so, do we want to narrow the list, or with the understanding that if you have an idea and your initials are next to it, you're responsible for further vetting it and developing it.
I didn't know that part, Adam. You get rid of number 1. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All of a sudden, Paula's like, wait, 3? I have 3 ideas.
So are we willing to stay a little bit longer to work through some of these ideas? As people are still here at 6:03. Yes. Okay.
I have 10 more minutes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the minimum teacher salary indexed.
Sorry, just one more thing to add. In discussing, when Leslie reviewed the sort of the number of ideas, part of it was we have limited resources as an organization, and so sort of the more ideas you have, the less resources are flowing to implement them. And so sort of when we bring ideas forward, the thought was, the more that we can like coalesce around specific ones that are actionable, the more likely we are to be able to put a concerted effort behind them, which is what led to the criteria. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
I put my one concern in the chat on that number 4, the minimum teacher salary index, is just making it more of a challenge for locals to bargain salary if they're already at or above that. It might be more challenging to try to get raises for your teachers, and then that may lead to people leaving, which is going to create that recruitment problem again.
Or discussion on the minimum teacher salary? Are we keeping it as a legislative solution?
Can we say ledge/bargaining?
Okay. Let's go down to the retention and figure out what else we got there. Number 1, more of an internal CTA idea. Yes, okay. The issue around dealing with trauma, behavior supports, implementation programs, examples of community schools, is that internal organizing on teaching people more about community schools? Is it additional resources in the budget? Like, what are some of the is it legislative? Is it internal?
We're looking at number 2 on retention.
Yes.
I would like to hear, I think it's internal, and I think there needs to be some needs assessments before, like, just because I'm hearing these things, and I think with the community schools model, some of it could be sharing of ideas or structures and how they were inclusive of these pieces. So that would be all internal.
Okay. Keisha?
I'm also thinking of, under better staffing, like thinking about the counselor ratios, and could those perhaps be legislated? Nursing ratios. People bargain them now, but I think, as we've said before, when it's a mandate, things happen. The districts do what they need to do. So perhaps and the community schools work has been from the state. The funding has been provided by the state. So I think maybe number 2 is ledge and bargaining.
So minimum counselor ratios, minimum nurse ratios.
Yeah, just staffing ratios, providing supports to students. And we have elementary counselors that are there just to support students. So I don't know if that could be something that could be legislated.
Anything more on 2? So 3, class size reduction legislation and our bargaining support, which is basically more money for schools, right? And mandatory class size or increasing the penalties is what I'm hearing. Okay. And prep time, as it could possibly be tied to, or anything more about 3, So 4 is prep time connected to arts and music. And I think it's really actually specifically referred to the arts and music initiative, right? That was passed, those additional resources. And is that internal bargaining, since the resources will be there, right? So that's an internal bargaining. Okay, we've got 8 ideas.
That's more than 5.
That's more than 5. Well, 1 to 5 was a suggestion. And so this is, the work that has to go on in between, right, to build out these ideas. Adam, do you want to share the template a little bit? So we see initials by these ideas, and you can also pair up, and I'm a resource for you. I'm sure Norma is, but for recruitment and retention, it's primarily myself and Efren Mercado. So building out the template and these ideas, for a presentation on February 23rd. Do you want to look at go through the template, Adam?
Yeah, sure. So the template that's linked at the end of the deck, what I can do is directly after this call, I can populate the title of the idea, as well as the person whose name is next to the idea. And so you'll have a section for each idea. In each section, there is just a description. So with the idea that you're going to be presenting this to the larger group for feedback and vetting, provide a summary of the idea. So if it's paid student teaching, it's saying it's getting specific about what we mean by that. And then the finding any data doesn't need to be like research data, could be any survey data, any recent articles that support this as an effective strategy. Doing some thinking about which committees are going to need to weigh in on this, the March Council. And if you want to go a step further, there's some possible supporting or opposing policy in those committees, ideas for implementation, and then when you're in the moment presenting, what are some discussion questions you'd like to ask? So you'll see a bumper, like a focus idea 2. I'll start the next one there. And this deck we can kind of work on collaboratively, or you can sort of pull off your slides and work on it on your own and then drop it in. But we will need to complete this prior to the 23rd, because the main activity will be presenting and seeking feedback on the sort of the host of ideas. Are there any questions on the template? Okay.
Hopefully you won't find this task daunting, right? Because we're still, still studying these ideas, right? So like, it doesn't have to, we all want to be perfect and have this fantastic, presentation, but we're going to do these are organic, right? So like these ideas we want to build upon and understand, right? So if there's questions that you have, like after this call or tomorrow or in the next few days, and you want to reach out to me and get more feedback, I'm happy to work with you on any of these issues, particularly in regards to legislation, right? Bargaining. That will be more what we might be recommending to our C4B or PCS partners. But I'm happy to help you with any and all of these. Any questions about this?
And I will, one more thing is I will be in all of them. And so there is a high likelihood that there will be ideas that recur. And so if, for example, tomorrow, the paid student teaching and induction is a +1, I may reach out to you and you may have another person added to your group.
How are we feeling about this process? Are we feeling okay? Okay, I'm seeing some shaking of heads. All right, everybody's been heard. Okay. All right. So not so bad, only 6:15, only 15 minutes over. All right. Anything else?
No, Lori, I can certainly do my slides, but the 23rd, our district is closed that week, and so we have a vacation scheduled, so I can't present. I'm not taking my laptop skiing.
Okay. All right. All right. Do you have a
But
friend who
I'll do
wants
my
to?
work.
You'll do your work. Does anybody want to partner with Paula? She has, let's see what we have. Recruit second career teachers and class size reduction and prep time. Right. You got to partner with Paula. You're looking. That means that you present on the 23rd.
Who volunteered? Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, well, so we're still seeking volunteers.
Okay.
Maybe someone in tomorrow's group will have like those same ideas and will be willing to help out.
Okay.
Because I realize they're booked.
Okay. Got it.
Sounds good. I'll follow up with you, Paula.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Your time and your energy, your thoughtful conversation. All right. Good night.
Good night.